Windows of a house.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We were just chatting behind the scenes. I'm with Rose Levy Beranbaum, no relation to me. I'm Rachel Levy Lesser, as you know. We just discussed, we're not related, but we have a lot of small world in common stories, which is really fun. And also with Rose is Woody. How do you say your last name, Woody? Woolston?
Woolston.
Woolston.
Yeah,
And
it's not slow spelled backwards.
It's what spelled backwards?
Not slow spelled backwards.
You never told me that. I've known her for 20 years.
Yeah, I told you.
Oh, I paid no attention.
So Rose and Woody, known on screen as Rosewood, love that, are streaming in from their home kitchen in New Jersey. I'm in my home kitchen in Pennsylvania. We discovered we're not that far from each other. We're going to meet in person one day and bake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So before we get baking with them, I am going to read their official bios. I first want to welcome everybody to Blaze Baking with Rach. This is our last show of the year. Happy holidays, everybody. This is a great show for everybody who wants to be baking holiday cookies. I know that's a fun thing to do this time of year. Of course, I'm always baking cookies. I don't need a holiday. For those of you who are new to the Blaze or the baking show, A Mighty Blaze was started in 2020 by New York Times bestselling authors Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum to keep book tours alive during COVID. And we are still doing that in the world beyond almost 3 years later. I host a baking show inspired by my love of books and all things baking. And actually in January, next month, our show, we're going to be celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the baking show with Eliza Sokolow, author of This Is What I Eat. But that's next month. Okay, let's talk about this month. Rose. Rose Levy Beranbaum, who I read is also known as the notorious RLB. Is that true?
Well, what part of it? I was wondering where you got that from. It was my friend Marissa Rothkopf Bates who told me that, and the publisher was somewhat upset. She said, no, it's like RPG. It's a good thing.
It's a great thing. I love it.
Love it.
There we go. She's an award-winning author of 12 cookbooks. This is your 13th, right?
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Including the Cake Bible, which was inducted into the International Association of Culinary Professionals Culinary Classic Awards, and the Baking Bible, IACP Best Baking Books for 2015. She also won a James Beard Foundation Award in 1998 for Rose's Christmas Cookies. And her 2003 book, The Bread Bible, was an IACP and James Beard Foundation nominee and was listed as one of the top 10 books of 2003 by Publishers Weekly and Food and Wine. Her popular blog, which I've been on a lot these days, realbakingwithrose.com, has created an international community of bakers where you can visit Rose Levy Beranbaum and join in the discussion on all things baking. Welcome, Rose, and welcome, Woody.
Thank you, Rach.
Thank you.
Yeah, so happy to have you here. We have a lot to talk about in terms of your books, what you're doing, your equipment, your baking tips. You have a lot. But before we do that, we're actually going to get to the sort of baking instructive part of it, because that's how we decided to do it. For those of you who are baking at home, my oven has already been preheated to 350. And I said this on my video last night. For this show, I did a lot of the work ahead of time because we're making the chocolate truffle cookies, which really you have to do a lot of the work ahead of time. Right, Rose?
Well, it's best to.
Yeah. So if this recipe is in the book, it's on page, let me see what it starts on.
149.
149, you're good. Here's the picture. We'll see if mine look like the picture. I don't know if they will.
Was it you who chose this recipe out of all the recipes?
I think maybe you gave me.
We did.
Oh, because it is our favorite recipe.
It's your favorite recipe?
Yes.
In the whole book. Yep.
Oh, wow. Well,
there are favorites, but this is Blue favorite.
You chose it, and I was like, what could be bad? It's chocolate and chocolate.
And your family said so, yes.
Yes. And I already made them last week, and my family loved them. And I make a lot of cookies. So, yeah. So I've already made the cookie dough, and the recipe is in the book. We also have the recipe up in graphics, which I can resend out again. But they're ready to go. I have 2 trays of 6 each, right? They're not perfectly round. They're pretty good. what we're going to do now, I also have the ganache balls, which I'm going to be honest with you, I've never made ganache before. So thank you.
Wow.
Oh, that is the ultimate way to eat chocolate. I'm so glad you did.
That's a great frosting.
Yeah.
Oh, you can use it as a frosting?
Oh, definitely. That's where we generally use it. Frosting cakes.
Well, I have to say, it was pretty easy to make. It was basically cream, and you just heat it up. You pour it over the dark chocolate, and you add butter. That was it, right?
Yeah. That's for this recipe. But generally, what did you do?
Actually, years ago, the common thought or understanding was that ganache could not be made in a food processor. And I thought, why not? And I found that that was the ultimate way to make it. Because prior to that, it had been cooked with the chocolate cooked together with a heavy cream, and it often separated, and you couldn't get it back together again. Whereas in a food processor, you just process the chocolate, pour in the just boiling cream, perfect every time, never breaks down. So I'm glad we're sharing this, because ganache is something people need to know. I mean, when I first heard of it, nobody had heard of it. I thought of it as the perfect nache, the ganache. Right. And actually, the word in France, it means somebody who's stupid. So, but it existed first in Switzerland, and it's considered by all the chocolatiers as something that's one of the basic things of their repertoire.
Wow. Well, I'm excited that I know how to make it now.
Yeah.
So we're going to basically put the ganache in the center of the cookie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So am I ready to go? Should I flatten out the cookies a little bit with the palm of my hand?
Yeah. And as we may have emailed to you yesterday, it's really helpful because you never know the temperature, especially in the winter, of your kitchen. And if the dough feels like it's stiff and it cracks a bit, when you try to put the truffle in the center, just knead it together with your fingers until it's kind of flexible. And you can't over knead a cookie because it has sugar in it. With a pie dough, you wouldn't want to do that.
Roll up your sleeves.
I'm rolling up my sleeves. Okay, we're gonna put the ganache ball in the center, and then I just pinch the cookie around it.
Yeah, well, I hold it in the palm of my hand, and then I bring up the sides.
Oh, you hold the cookie in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right, hang on.
And that also warms it a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
well, I'm gonna do that for all the cookies. While I do that, it's funny. It reminds me a little bit of the cookie, of the Hummintaschen cookie, where you put you put the jam in the middle or whatever you want to put in, and then you close it up. Okay, this is not as scary as I thought it was going to be. This is good.
Well, you made them already, and I'm sure they came out fine. Which just
they did.
So that there's more than one way to shape a cookie. And then after I bring up the sides, and I make it smooth by rolling it into a ball.
Oh, you roll it into a ball.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm going to do that now. That's great. Yeah. And then do I flatten out the ball a little bit, or no? Just put it on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do to 2 inches when we're not using any rings.
Okay. Now I'm just so everybody at home knows this, I'm putting it on a prepared cookie sheet. So I'm using parchment paper.
Great.
That's what we do.
Okay. So while I'm doing this, can I ask you about this, your 13th book, the Cookie Bible? You have the Cake Bible. Let me see if I get this right. The Bread Bible, the Pastry Bible, the Baking Bible, and now the Cookie Bible.
Yeah, well, those are the Bibles, but there was also Rose's Christmas Cookies. That was my first cookie book.
Oh, that was your first cookie book. Okay, so what made you decide now? Because I know you've been writing cookbooks for a long time.
The Christmas cookie book came out after the Cake Bible, and that's a long time ago. And my editor asked me to do it. It's a long story, but it was kind of a last-minute thing, and I had a good collection already of cookies, and people contributed. But everybody thought of it as a Christmas cookie book. And the fact is, any cookie can be made any time of the year. Christmas cookies per se are the ones that are decorated to look like Santa Claus, right? I mean, the Hanukkah cookies too. So all these years later, somebody wrote to me saying, you should do a cookie Bible. And I thought, that even sounds silly. It's like Cake Bible, Bread Bible, that sounds like a tome, but Cookie Bible? Yes. And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, I've done all these different subjects, and cookies are a major subject, and probably more loved than any of the other subjects. So wouldn't it be fun to put all the things I learned to making the original cookies even better, and to add all the new ones that have come up along the way? And that's how this book came about.
That completes our 4 genres of baking too. So cakes, pies, breads, and cookies.
This is the last Bible.
I think so.
Well, no, well,
What do we think?
yes and no.
What do
Can we
you
do a brownie Bible?
No, but we're gonna have a revised cake
Oh,
Bible.
that's right.
Oh,
And
yeah. Tell me about that. Okay.
Well, the Cake Bible is now, believe it or not, in its 60th printing, and it's having a 35th anniversary next year. So we realize the time has come because so much has changed in 40 years, which is when I first started working on it, even before then. And we thought that this would be a really great project, but I could not have done it if not for Woody, because I always felt, I went to FIT, to the Fashion Institute, and both my grandmothers were in the garment trade. So I grew up craftsy. I like to say I went from draping fabric to draping fondant. So I always knew that it's easier to start a new dress than try to fix it, alter an old one. And that's true of a book. But this one has passed the test of time. There are so many people who grew up with birthday cakes from the book, or special cakes, or wedding cakes. And also, they started even their careers and having bake shops, even in Africa. So I thought this deserves a new look. Not just a new look and new pictures, but all the new things. Like there's not going to be any weight ounces anymore because the weight and fluid ounces are different, just grams and volume. And the formatting is different. It'll be a larger book and different writing as well.
And it will have a stitched binding.
Well, we hope.
Okay. So
Yes.
that book
It
is
will have a stitched binding.
It's better have a
that book is coming out in 2023, did you say? Or
24th. It's for the 35th anniversary, but even coming out then means that we're working night and day now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Actually, at this stage now we're reading through the entire book. And we've already proofed all the weights and everything, but every time we read it, we see something different. You were going to say something?
Maybe you'll come back in the show in 2024 for the new cake.
Sure. That would be wonderful.
For caking.
Okay.
So
I'm going to put these in the oven. So 14 minutes? Is that what you said?
I would do 14 because as long as the outside feels firm, and you did flatten them to around 2 inches, right?
Oh, wait a second. I do need to flatten them. This is a working kitchen right now, so excuse me while I go look at my oven. I don't yet have all the angles set up, so you see me everywhere. So while I'm off camera.
You just want it so that the outside edges feel firm, but it still should be soft in the middle.
Yeah, no, these look really good. I'm excited about how they came out.
Oh, good.
I feel like the second time is always easier to make these.
Isn't that true? In fact, when I do something right after having just done it, it's really easy. I don't even have to think.
I know. For most of these shows, as my family knows, I will try to practice the recipe before the actual show. I don't always have time to do that. But for this one, I was glad that I did it.
I have to tell you something we discovered, because every time we make something that we've already perfected, we think, let's try something a little different. So this time,
Like me making them.
I meant that too, because I was sick. So usually I wanted to at least do most of it, if not some of it. But this time I said, Woody, that's it. I've been afraid of, when you get a kind of flu or virus, you can't think clearly, and I didn't want to mess them up. So I decided to use.
Mess them up.
I decided to use a ganache that I'd made that was more cream to chocolate. Traditionally it's equal cream. It's never good with the high percentage cocoa chocolate, but now I'm using like 1 1/3 times more. And of course the ganache balls were firm, but what happened is that they melted. Instead of staying in the center with a little ooze or creaminess, I thought they disappeared when we opened it up, and instead my mouth's watering remembering. It felt and it sort of floated through the entire cookie. So you had the crunch, but every bite had some of that creamy ganache. It was magical. So I guess you just can't really go wrong with this, right?
Yeah. Well, after you chewed me out.
Where'd
Where'd the ball go? It went
Woody
away.
used to work at McDonald's, and he makes the most wonderful hamburgers. He just knows how to shape them. So he said, I said, well, these don't look right. Why are there all these cracks? And he said, well, I brought them up I brought it up the top the way I do hamburgers, and I shaped it really gently. And I said, these aren't hamburgers; they're chocolate cookies.
Oh my
It
God.
turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
They came out well.
Because probably that was part of the reason that it spread as well.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I'm actually going to a holiday party tomorrow afternoon, and I was asked to bring the dessert because I'm always asked to bring the dessert. So if anybody who's going to be at that party tomorrow is watching, this is what I'm bringing. So, can I ask you a question because you're sort of known for your attention to detail. If I can read this quote from the Washington Post that I found on you, I think this may have been from your website. And I think this is a big compliment. She said about Rose, she's obsessed. There's really no other way to describe cookbook author Rose Levy Beranbaum and her fixation with the minutia of baking. If God is in the details, as the aphorisms goes, then Beranbaum must have one foot in heaven. So I love that quote. Can you tell us about sort of you as a baker and a cookbook author and your attention to detail? Because I felt like when I was reading through this cookbook, and I read a lot of cookbooks, I felt like you were holding my hand the whole time, and there was no question left unanswered in terms of your attention to detail with measurements and equipment. And talk a little bit about some of your equipment. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Thanks, Rach, because the fact is I am sort of in heaven. I mean, I even wrote a book called ROSE Heavenly Cakes because my little nephew said, you keep saying heavenly, heavenly, everything is heavenly. And I said, that's because it is. And being a baker makes it even more so. But I love savory cooking too. And to be able to write about what I love and do this every day of the week, plus eat it, doesn't get better than that. And except it does get better since I started working with Woody, to have a partner who understands what you're doing and mostly listens to you. And Publishers Weekly called us Partners in Creme. And
Love it. Partners in Creme.
Yeah, and it was the production editor at HarperCollins, who was actually Hood Mifflin Harcourt, keeps things changing in publishing, but she gave this to us as a wedding present.
That's
so
awesome.
We wear it for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've always been a kind of detail-oriented person, and I've noticed that any quality that you have can either be considered a good thing or a bad thing. In other words, it could drive people nuts, and some editors wouldn't have wanted to work with me because they didn't like all those details. In fact, the Cake Bible was rejected by an editor first who wrote, you throw the reader into a quandary of contingencies. You tell them more than they need to know. You go way over their head. That was about 40 years ago. And people are now eating up understanding, science. The first article I wrote for Cook's magazine was the only magazine that would have even let me say how to understand the making of a layer cake or a genoise. But that was what interested me. I wanted things to work, and plus I wanted other people to be able to succeed from my recipes. So whereas initially people thought so much information, then they realized that it was valuable information. And after I'd gotten that criticism, I thought, what shall I do? If I don't like that advice, I won't take it. But if I think there's some truth, what I'll do is I'll address it. And I did it by taking some of the details that you don't need to see a second and third time and put them in a sidebar, so it doesn't interrupt the flow of the recipe. And I think the reason the Cake Bible succeeded so well was because people were actually able to bake who maybe never could bake before.
That's how I felt about this. And, I'm an experienced baker, obviously, but there were a lot of details in this. And I appreciated the fact that every question I may have had in my head was answered. And I feel like for people who maybe are more a little, big picture, they don't have to read all the details if they don't want to,
That's why we separate them out. Pointers of success, gems, understanding.
Okay, about the gems, I love this. I told you about this. I'm a heart person. I'm wearing a little heart necklace today in honor of you guys. Oh. I love how instead of bullet points, you have hearts. Could you talk to me about that?
Well, I'm also a heart person. I love love, and baking is love. And so every book that I did, when I submitted the manuscript, I would put, instead of bullet points, I'd put a heart. And they would take it out systematically, like men won't buy it, it's too sentimental, whatever the reason. But the person who designed this book in the past 2 books, she left it in. I never gave up. I just kept putting them in, waiting for them to be taken out. Ty Blanche went to the same high school as I did in New York City, music and art. She was an art student. I was a music student. And she went a couple of decades after I did. But I love her sense of design. And in fact, she's the one who did the painting of our RBG. And I said to her, never sell this to anybody. It's the most amazing piece of art. And the next day I woke up and I wrote to her and I said, I changed my mind, sell it to us. And it's in my living room. And she did.
I love it. I love that personal touch. I'm a heart person. My kids know this. I'm always hearting on notes. I'm also an XO person. So I feel like I would have XOs. That's how I sign. I actually sign a lot of emails XO, even even business ones. I don't know if I sent one to you, XOXO, if it's
I
inappropriate.
do a lot of business ones with a heart, but I always do the rose. Luckily, there's a rose emoji, and I found a woody emergency, at least a log of wood, but he didn't like it. I don't blame him. So he's emoji-less.
Speaking of Woody, can you tell me how you two met? I think you started working together first and then became a couple. Can you tell us that story?
Yes. Basically, I was baking out of the Cake Bible, and all my friends were saying, "Yeah, your chocolate oblivion is incredible. Your cakes are incredible. You should open a bakery." And so I was learning how to bake, and this back in the 2000. So in 2004, I emailed Rose, and back then she just had the regular website. There was no blogging back then.
Right.
And I said, I got a couple of questions for you. And she answered them and said, these are pretty good. Because we get a lot of questions where, like, if the person read page 2, they know the answer already.
Oh, you had a good question.
I gave her a good question. So this is beginning of 2004. She came out in August to General Mills to do a cookie exchange in Minneapolis, where I was living. I said, I can't meet you, so you can sign my book. And she came. I brought 2 cakes with me, and we went to Caribou Coffee, which is kind of like a Starbucks, and snuck them in, and she tried them and said, these are as good as mine.
No, I thought they were better.
Well, that seemed better. So she said, I'll give you a couple of recipes to play with, and she did that. And about a year later, she said, well, I really never had anybody ever work with me because I don't.
You were working on your own.
She always worked on her own. So she said, well, come on out and we'll see how things go. And they went. And we communicated and collaborated for years. Did Rose's Heavenly Cakes, started working on the Baking Bible. Baking Bible is about ready to go into a style shoot, and Rose in 2013 moved out here to Hope, New Jersey, where we are. And she basically said, I'm moving, you're moving too. So you can work with me.
Well, he hated missing out on photo shoots. That's like when you're, I think, a playwright author, and you see your play enacted the first time, and it comes to life. That's when a book comes to life. Either when you do the styling, or you participate, or somebody else does. And Woody didn't get to experience that until he came.
I'm
looking at some of these pictures. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
We have a wonderful photographer.
Yeah.
He's a real good friend.
What's
I
the name?
moved out, and we've collaborated ever since. And in 2021, June 21st.
Don't forget your anniversary.
I'm married.
That's amazing.
There's that little gap in COVID where the window where it was relatively safe.
And you got married then. Yeah. That's amazing. That's so great. You had sent me, Woody, which was really helpful, Rose Levy Beranbaum's Golden Rules for Baking, some of your tips.
Yes.
Can you tell our viewers, I know there's a lot of them, but just some tips maybe that they could take away from today, because I think they could be really helpful.
I like the weighing one the most.
Okay. Well, tell about weighing.
Okay.
Okay, Wang. And by the way, while we're going through the tips, feel free to talk about some of the equipment that you sell, because I know a lot of it's on your website, and I'm a big fan of good baking equipment. So
It can really make or break things. And I have to say that I was the first person to put weights in a book. That was the Cake Bible. And got to the point where I'd written an article for the LA Times, Way to Bake, that how much it's easier and faster and more accurate. And the Ascali company.
And less messy.
yeah.
Actually made a scale with my name on it. This is the one, but it no longer exists. But they still have that model of scale. Point is, though, that most scales now are really reasonably accurate. And you can switch between ounces and grams, though grams are easier and more accurate too. And this will really change your life if you're not already doing that. Because if you were to measure flour and you dumped it in with a heavy hand or dip and scoop, you would have empty maybe 1 3/4 cups instead of 1 cup. So that's why we give the method, if you are going to use volume, to lightly spoon it into the cup and level it off and use a measuring, the cup with an unbroken rim. But you'd be much happier using a scale. So that's our number 1.
Yeah.
And of course,
Okay,
it's your turn.
one nice thing about weighing is that most scales these days can also take about 10 or 13 pounds of weight.
Mm-hmm.
So in making virtually all our cookie doughs, we show at the top of the chart how many grams that you should get, or within
Total
reasonable,
dough.
a total dough, within a reasonable, and we do, take some off, like so in case you don't get every single smidgen out of there. So by weighing, you put the scale on there and just start weighing out, and then at the end,
And you tear out the weight.
Tear out the weight.
means it goes back to 0.
but you put the scale in
In
there
between
and
the
make your dough, and then at the end you can check. Oh, it's all in there.
That's amazing.
And if you don't, you go, oh, and we've had it happen. I forgot the cup of sugar. You'll know if you're short.
And by the way, speaking of flour, there is a difference between bleached and unbleached. Unbleached is a slightly higher protein content, which means it will brown sooner and will also cause the cookie to puff less and also to spread less because it ties up any liquid that's in the dough. So there's a time when you want to have unbleached, because if you have a cookie that doesn't bake a very long time and it doesn't get brown enough, it will brown more with the unbleached. That's what we specify. The two most important instruments in the kitchen are, aside from the oven, of course,
And the scale.
scale and an accurate instant read thermometer. And this is the Thermopen 1 that actually reads within 1 second, almost as fast as the human brain.
I could have used that on Thanksgiving. There's
Yeah.
always a debate.
We have one in almost every corner of the house.
Wait, by the way, we have Margaret. One of our viewers is commenting a little bit. Margaret, first of all, she says chocolate truffle, and she also mentioned how, and I love our viewer comments, that she's made the Christmas batch of chocolate chip cookies with her dad. Nostalgia for the win. So yeah, this time of year, there's so much nostalgia in holiday baking, don't you think?
Oh yeah. People who never bake any other time will bake this time of year.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I used to go to a holiday cookie party every year where people went nuts with the baking. So that was always fun. Hang on, my oven is dinging. So let me take.
Yeah, we just heard it. I was wondering what that.
We were afraid it was coming from ours.
All happening live.
Like, what do we forget to turn off here? Will you please cover that, or are you going to be showing that?
We can show this.
Oh, right.
They
Protect
look
the
great.
cookie portrait.
We'll do that. We'll,
Let them cool on top of the oven for a little bit, but they look perfect.
So we talked about the two things that we did not create, but here's what we did. And this is the world's only reduction spatula. It's silicone, and you know how recipes say reduce something by 1/3 or from 1 cup to a 1/2 cup?
Yes.
Way they're little ridges that are permanent because they're not embossed on it. They're just raised.
And you invented this?
Yes.
So people can buy it on your website, right?
Indirectly, yeah. It's on the website, and then there's a link to Amazon. And the really exciting thing is that when you reduce liquids or even heat liquids in a microwave, if you don't watch it or stir every 20 seconds, they burst out and you lose the liquid, and it's all over the oven that you have to clean.
That has happened to me many times.
Me too. And this one day I just left this in. And even though it's metal, it's protected by the silicone. You don't need to stir it. It doesn't spurt out. Except don't clarify butter in it. It's this water in butter that will just explode no matter what, unless you stir constantly.
Right.
So, okay, your turn.
That's awesome. Okay, what's up next? I feel like Woody, you were sort of like the Vanna White there, like you were showing it like that.
yes, we'll do more.
Good job. What else do we have?
Mise en place, or set up your ingredients.
Yes.
Do you do that?
I do that all the time. I'm famous for that. In fact, since I do the baking show, when I say I'm famous in my family, because we have this kitchen island here, and like the night before a baking show, the stuff that can go out on the counter, I will put it out there. I am a big fan of getting everything out because I don't like to be running around the kitchen, or even worse, realizing that you don't have an ingredient when you're already in the middle of it.
I guess you don't have pets that are going to jump up.
No pets.
We have pests, not pets. So we have to be careful.
Yeah,
We put things in the ovens, to, as long as they're not on with no pilot light. But do your kids help also? Do they participate in baking?
Yeah, well, my kids are teenagers now. They're 16 and 19. So I keep saying I have kids. I think people think little kids, but my daughter, who's 16, likes to help a lot, and I've been baking with my kids forever. So they've always been a big part of it, and they obviously still lick the bowl, and they're good taste testers. So yeah, they're big bakers.
Okay. Well, since you're going by the numbers there, we better go back. One is and you probably do it too, designate equipment depending on where it's being used. So if you're using it in savory kitchen, and we've got lucky because our savory kitchen's upstairs. But
So
designate.
you have a savory kitchen and a sweet kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I turned the entire basement into a baking kitchen. When I moved from New York, I had all the same stuff I had here. There was just no room for it.
So we're underground
Tiny little
here.
kitchen.
So you're in your baking, you're in your underground sweet kitchen.
Yeah, no windows, no distraction.
That's awesome.
Temperature controlled.
So you come downstairs to bake and then you cook your savory dishes upstairs.
Yeah, so you know that baked butter and chocolate are culprits for absorbing other flavors. So if you have garlic going on upstairs and you're baking down at the same place, it's going to infiltrate the chocolate and the butter. So it's a real luxury to be able to have this. But the important thing is silicone spatulas. If you have the same kitchen and you're using baking and savory for it, use different colors. That's a good way to remember which are the ones for baking and which are the ones for savory, because you cannot get the aroma out of them.
Wow.
Even pans with nonstick linings. Woody by mistake used one of my baking nonstick pans for doing something savory, and I had to call a company. I said, I can't get it out. And only one person there knew what to do. Boil it with vinegar. But this is, I mean, nonstick linings have a different way of performing and retaining odors and heat, and nobody seems to address that. You know, like the heat's less. Like I have a griddle that is nonstick, and the same model that was out before that was not nonstick. And the nonstick one, you have to do at a higher temperature, 25 degrees higher. So this is the thing. This is what I mean by things changing over the years. You keep learning about the new technology.
And the technology changes.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to be able to share that, because you think, like, what's happening? Why isn't this behaving the way it used to? And it's because you've done something different, or the equipment is different, or the ingredients are different.
I have a question though. So obviously your books have all been about baking. Do you like to cook though too? And do you cook often?
Confession, I did do 2 savory books.
Oh,
And I'm asking Julia, well, I asked Julia Child if that would be a good idea, because I love savory cooking. And she said, people have done it. It's very hard to be thought of as a savory cook when you're thought of as a baking cook.
Right.
So both of them,
I'll give you that advice.
I think they're 50 cents on Amazon plus shipping, which is probably
amazing. I mean, obviously I was more focused on your baking books. And as I said in my video last night, you've written all the Bibles, right?
yeah.
Okay, so you do have your hand in cooking too, and savory as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, on our website, we sometimes get comments like, the recipe of the month is for spaghetti.
Right. What's up with that? Yeah.
What's up with that? Not baking, because we do a lot of savory
Yeah, but the
cooking.
meatballs use my home baked bread.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna check out some of your savory stuff too, because I like to bake more than I like to cook, but I still like to cook.
Yeah.
I like
Back
to
to
eat
the show,
savory more than I like to bake.
Yeah.
To eat baked stuff, but I love baking, and baking bread in particular.
Yeah, especially ridiculous we are. We're making our spaghetti meatballs. We'll make the meatball mix up. My job is to weigh them.
That's
They're
so funny.
47 grams. Her job is to roll them.
Well, you mentioned, how much you bake and bread, and I'm curious to know about baking for you all during the pandemic, because I think, as I said to you offline, this show really started during the pandemic because everybody was home baking and we wanted to promote cookbook authors and other authors. So did your online community sort of blow up? Like, were people reaching out to you with questions like never before?
Pandemic, then even when we write cookbooks, I mean, everybody wants to bake bread, and most people had never baked before.
Yes.
Bread anyway, so there were so many questions, and Woody doesn't know as much about bread as I do, because there was no need for him. I'd already finished the bread Bible, and I just always did the bread. So it was a full-time job, but he was doing everything else at the time.
But the pandemic did produce something about bread.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about flour.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go about that?
Well, I couldn't even get flour in the supermarket. I called General Mills.
Yeah.
I used to be on your flour bag. Couldn't you just help me out? The thing is that I ended up buying a 50-pound bag of commercial flour, and people started saying to me that they were able to get some regular bread in the supermarket, but their breads weren't rising as high as they had been. like instead of 4.5 inches high, it was 3, a whole inch lower. And so I consulted the book I wrote because I completely
Consulted yourself.
yeah, except something like that. Asked me, what is happening here?
Rose, what would you do?
Yeah. And I realized that when flour is milled, I've written, that it needs at least 3 days of maturation, they call it, or ripening. And they were in a rush to get it out to the supermarkets and all these people who wanted to bake, so they were sending it out prematurely.
That's so interesting.
And the person who gave us these aprons actually had been a baker in an actual commercial setting. And she said, oh yeah, I've been adding a pinch of vital wheat gluten to my flour. And she noticed this was happening. So
Wow.
it wasn't just us, but at first I thought I was wringing my hands. I thought, this is happening to me too with the little flour I've left. But with the commercial flour, it wasn't. So I guess they couldn't do that with bakeries because it would be a disaster. Bakeries would know right away.
Yeah, it was crazy. I'm curious. I think I saw a couple audience questions pop up. Do we have any audience questions from behind the scenes? Okay, here we go. Barney wants to know, how do I get my kolache's cookies from opening during baking?
I don't have any kolache cookies. I mean, I've made them, but I remember not loving them. So I probably have something very similar, and so I can't really address something that I can't remember what it's supposed to look like. Like,
okay,
you know, why is it sealed? Is it not sealed tightly enough? Do you need a little egg? Because egg white is the glue of the pastry chef. So when I want to have sesame seeds stick to the cookies, like the tahini crisps or even hamburger buns, I brush it with egg white and they really stick on. So maybe you just need to have a little adhesive there.
Okay.
So felt better.
That's okay. That's a really good tip. On the fly, you answered that for sure. I'm curious to know, I mean, you are such baking experts. Have you had any baking fails you care to share with us at all? Perhaps in the recipe development, in writing the cookbooks over the years? Yeah.
It's funny because when something fails, I usually just keep trying until it works again.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll say with failure, we actually purposely try to fail. And
Okay.
that
I'm kidding.
and that when we're doing the baking Bible, the cake called the Renee Fleming, which is a chiffon cake baked in a layer pan, I did 27 tests on it. And the reason for doing so many was that once we found what the baking powder we thought was right, let's say 3 tablespoons, I then baked it at 3.5 tablespoons. I did 2 3/4, and because I want to make sure it did fail, so that we knew exactly what it was. So that's. But also we've had our biggest failure, because of not us, was we were making genoise.
Oh, that was really interesting. Yeah, that's another example of things changing, because genoise is the only sponge cake I can think of where you don't separate the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And I was making it for wedding cakes. It was a 12-inch layer, and somebody reported that her genoise was coarse in texture. And I thought, well, she must be doing something wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. Mine was coarse. I could just see it from even the outside. So I started thinking about it, and then I realized that the egg yolks have shrunk. I mean, everybody's been noticing this, that the average egg yolk has gotten smaller and the egg white has gotten larger. And I finally got to the bottom of that when I was teaching a class, and somebody is in Vermont, she raised chickens, and she said, oh yeah, it doesn't happen to us because we raise our own chickens, but in the commercial industry, they're using younger laying hens for the chickens. You know, so even if you get a jumbo egg, the yolk is still smaller than it used to be. And with the genoise, it makes a huge difference because it's a delicate cake, and egg yolks are used to emulsify, to mix things evenly. So we actually separated the egg yolks, and I had to add a whole extra, well, an extra one for just a 9-inch. I think it was 3 extra egg yolks for a 12-inch. And now when we give recipes for egg yolks, we say something like 6 to 9. And at first, like in our Ice Cream Bliss book, people said, couldn't you make up your mind which it should be? And I said, no, it's the chickens can't make up their mind. You know?
You have to look at the chicken. You have to look. You have to see what size chicken you're getting. How old was the chicken from the eggs? Right. You got to.
And honestly, that's a pet peeve of ours, because we'll look at books from notable authors, and they'll put grams in for virtually everything, but not eggs, and that is a huge variable.
Well, I should tell you
because we say an egg is 20 grams for a yolk, 30 grams for a white, 50 total. We've seen yolks go down to 12 grams.
Right.
Like peewee,
And,
but they're not peewee eggs.
Yeah, and so with the Cake Bible, because that established 20 grams for the weight, we're going to have to keep with that. But good example, another author, she claims 15, and another author for her.
And the
egg yolks.
USDA also has actually changed it.
They've
But
lowered
I
it down
can't
to
rewrite
16.
my books, or
Yeah.
I'm only
Right.
one of them.
That's so interesting because I bake a lot. I always just say, 4 eggs, 4 eggs. But I should look at it because you are right. The size of the yolk changes, and you really have to take a look at that.
But Rach, the most interesting thing is that when the yolk is smaller, the white is larger.
Yes.
And I think the most important tip I've ever come up with is that, how recipes say, beat the egg whites until stiff but not dry, because if you continue beating past the peaks, it will break down, and then when you mix them in, you don't have the aeration. So
Right.
one day I decided I would just see how much cream of tartar I could increase and if it would help. And I discovered that if you use 1/8 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar per egg white, you can beat for 20 to 30 minutes and it won't overcook.
There we go.
Ah,
Cream of tartar.
We're making that thing. All right, so
I feel like of all the baking shows I've ever done, I'm loving this because we are like in the weeds of the baking science, and I love it.
and this is applied baking science. I used to be very insulted when my former husband, my late husband, who's a doctor and a scientist, called me an
I'll be back again.
alchemist. He said, "You're not a scientist, you're an alchemist." And I thought, yeah, right. Spinning straw into gold, you're putting me down. And it was years until I discovered, he told me that, no, it's a compliment, because scientists theorize, and their theories are usually proven wrong, and they change them. Whereas an alchemist like you tries it out, and your theories are based on what actually happens. And I thought, I shouldn't have been so defensive. I should have said exactly what do you mean by
a proof. It's like when you do a proof, when you have to prove your theory. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now with the genoise, we took care of the egg yolks
And the whites.
made the genoise, and it still sank.
But it wasn't
Because
coarse.
it
was not as fine as it had been.
Right.
But
because another ingredient had changed.
Yeah.
And that is because of what farming has done with a lot of things today. It's called GMO.
I was just really thinking. Yeah.
who would have thought that would make a difference? Genetically modified.
So we investigated that and found out, let's try a different cornstarch. So we went to a non-GMO cornstarch. Just happens to be Rumford, and the problem got fixed.
Well, that is even more interesting how you're coming up with the new version of the Cake Bible, because certainly 35 years ago, the eggs, I buy organic, but the eggs and everything was not pumped up with hormones the way that it is today. So that's really fascinating.
And we have the most wonderful editor for the Cake Bible. The original was Maria Cornicelli, but Cassie Morgan Jones is the one who's doing the new one. And several years ago, when we discovered this problem, she actually allowed me, and they don't like changes like this, to add 1 extra egg yolk to every single recipe in the book, except where we needed more than one. And it's tricky to make additions for the editor and for the publisher. But in addition to that, we discovered that we didn't put bleached cake flour because that was the only cake flour that existed. And now people have come up with what they call a bleached cake flour that's not cake flour. And it doesn't perform the same way. It doesn't emulsify the ingredients. So when the cake bakes, it looks fine, but then it drops in the center. And then the whole texture is off. So this is what we deal with, these few simple ingredients. And when they change, it just throws everything.
That's so cool. Well, before we go, I can't believe we've already been on for so long. I could talk to you guys forever. We're doing a little show and tell. I'm going to show you the cookies. And can you also show us a couple treats? I know you had a cool picture to show us and a puzzle and some of just the cool things you have going on in your kitchen.
Sure.
Okay. What do you
think? Portrait.
It's your portrait. That's Rose. Isn't that
Chris
great?
Taylor, one of the 2 pie guys who wrote a cookie book recently,
and the new pie.
And the new pie.
And modern cookies.
Incredible artist. And
modern cookies.
And it was about 3 years ago, and I can't bear to eat it.
No, you can't. You have to keep it. It is art.
Yeah.
Here we go. Do we have the puzzle?
Puzzle. This is a puzzle that includes most of the cookie recipes in this book.
That's my kind of puzzle. And you can see up there in the upper left, like, where's Waldo? There's the Cookie Bible.
Yep.
And
here's-
also the picture of her facials in there too.
the cookie. Yeah, they superimposed the cookie portrait on top.
Very
of
cool. And we put a link to where you can buy that.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. All right.
To make a big point, the
Heart
profits from that puzzle sale go to charity.
Okay. Thank
Like
you.
like the Veterans Association, etc.
That's
Then,
great.
Oh, this one
other
quickly.
things.
Yeah.
No, show and tell, because I'm going to show you the cookies. What's that?
Oh, good.
This is a mini silicone rolling pin.
Okay, I could have used that because when I was rolling out the cookies, I had to use this old baby. So I'm going to order that.
Yeah, we use that. That's really great. I
Yeah.
use it more than I use the big one.
Yeah.
No, that would be really good.
Stick rolling pin that exists.
Yeah,
The
they make a
large
big
Brahma
one
is
too.
also- Yeah, that's also under the on Amazon. What do we call it again? Rose's Signature Series.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, here come the cookies.
Here come the cookies.
Yay!
I'm really excited. The tray actually cooled down. They came out, I think they came out good. I'm excited.
And of course, cookies continue baking when you take them out of the oven.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to take them out before they
Here's
get
ours.
too done and let them cool. But if they're cool enough, now you can break it open and see if you a nice.
Ready?
Try a bite.
I didn't say you should.
Well, I can't open it.
All right, you want to vacuum, so if you get crumbs all over the
Oh,
floor.
I'll explain the real one. Yeah, the ganache is coming out.
Oh, isn't that neat?
It's
Yeah.
really good.
Mm.
It's a good cookie. And you know what? When you make it for your family or if you're bringing it to someone's house for the holidays, I mean, you feel like you're a pretty legit baker, particularly because you had Rose with you the whole time as you made the ganache and as you made the dough and all of that. So
Free lunch and with a glass of
A
milk.
couple real quick things too. We want to say our website is Real Baking with Rose.
yes.
Two things that we do that we're not sure other people do. One is we have an ask a question. So just like we got comments here, do put the questions on. Now we've been getting floods of questions.
Yes, I read that and you'll get back to them within like 48 hours.
Right.
Yeah. That's
Two,
great.
The second thing is that cookbooks have errors in them. They're going to get them whether it's from us, the publisher. We just had one where we saw it was in what we call the galleys, which is our kind of like our little paperback to see how the book's supposed to be. And we looked at the PDFs and everything. And with the printing the book, a baking gem just disappeared.
Wow.
It just didn't have enough room on the page. So
But it did have enough room. It just somehow magically vanished.
vanished off of that.
Yeah,
But
this
errors
happens
happen.
to everybody.
So on our website, if you go to the Rose's books and then scroll down, hit any of the books like the Cake Bible, Cookie Bible, on that page's website, there is a correction enhancement button you can push and you can print off those corrections. And
That's
correct
so
them.
cool. I love that.
Yeah. And or we get something where we gave you a couple of tips yesterday about how to do the cookies. We'll add that as an enhancement too.
I appreciated that. I posted a video yesterday of me prepping the dough and Woody sent me a note with some tips, which I very much appreciated it. I needed that. So it was great. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure talking to you. I know our viewers loved it. And this video, as I told you, will remain on YouTube. So, people can come back and watch it forever if you want to. I feel like it's a good video to have in handy, particularly as people are baking for the holidays. So thank you to Rose and Woody.
Thank you, Rach.
Thank you,
And
Rachel.
You are our last of a huge, long tour. So
Yeah. You're our finale.
Yes,
I'm honored.
going out.
Well, this is our last show of 2022, but like I said, we'll be back the last Saturday in January for the special 2-year anniversary show. I can't believe it. With Eliza Sokolow, who she's a food stylist. She worked with Jamie Oliver in the Food Revolution. She's a photographer. This is her first book. It's called This Is What I Eat. And it's actually a cookbook for kids. And we're going to be baking some really cool stuff. And so I'm excited to have her on. So that's coming up next time.
You're living in heaven too.
Yes. For now, thank you so much. Thanks to our viewers. Happy holidays, everybody. And we'll see you next year. Thanks so much.